YouTube. He came and he preached, and lots of my friends were there. My little startup church, which is alive and well and not so little anymore, was hosting the occasion. It had as much formality to it as I can stomach, including what is called the charge to the newly ordained minister, me. That was delivered by my favorite philosophy professor who had driven 420 miles to be there, Dr. Tom Gregory. I was humbled and honored by his presence. Do you know what he said? I'll never forget it because it really made me squirm. His opening line was, "John, you have beautiful feet." I thought I was going to die. This was a very proper curmudgeon, not given to the type of shocking lines I like to deliver. What was his point? He went on to quote the prophet Isaiah, "How beautiful on the mountains are the feet of those who bring good news." The Apostle Paul quotes this in his letter to the Romans, asking how people can believe if they haven't heard. So feet are this wonderful image of good news of Christ being taken from one place to the next. My professor knew of my desire for people to hear the good news of the gospel, particularly those who had heard bad news in the places where good news was to dominate. At Church Hurts and we know that is too often the church. But let's get back to feet. Do you remember when athletic shoes were called tennis shoes or sneakers? The only brand names I remember were PF Flyers and Keds, and the color options were black and white. Now, do you remember the first pair of athletic shoes you had, which weren't canvas? If you aren't old like me, you won't remember that. When what we have on our feet today is simply an established fashion statement, and we get a glimpse into that inside athletic fashion shoe world, jump into the basketball court today, and then we're going to take a trip to the Philippines with a man who knows the inside story. Welcome, shoe dog David Corsi, to Church Hurts and.
Great to be here, John. Thanks for having me.
Hey, David, everyone here has heard of Converse, but I'm wondering what it was like coming home in 2004 and saying to your wife, "Honey, I bought Converse," and meaning something other than a pair of shoes. Was Converse really on the auction block? And tell me about that, won't you?
Yeah, no, it's hard to believe because Converse has been around more than 100 years, but they were on the auction block. Literally, people were bidding to buy the company. It was not bankruptcy, or it was auction. And the group that I was associated with bought it for $98 million. But it was on. I know it's hard for people today to believe it because Converse is like Converse, Vans, Nike. But yeah, auction block.
And you were part of that team where you were really at the marketing. You were the marketing guy, weren't you? Or what was your deal?
Well, me and my friend Jim Strasser, we were the executive sales team that was involved in brought in to build an entire sales team and work with marketing and product to bring the brand back to existence.
And so now when you say brand, it used to be that we didn't really realize that shoe companies were paying people to, that were saying, "Hey, if you have our brand." Now we all know the story of, Tiger Woods signing with Nike was a bigger deal than Tiger Woods going pro. But I remember a story. Yeah, I haven't told you this before, but, I knew Tom Clancy back when he was alive. He wasn't my best friend, but we were talking one time, and I said, I heard you had been telling like potential writers, you had to speak at a seminar of how to get your book sold. And he gave this whole seminar. And then at the end, he said, well, and it kind of helps when the president's coming out of the White House, going to his helicopter. If somebody asks him, "What are you reading?" And he says, "Oh, I'm reading this book by Tom Clancy by some little press called The Hunt for Red October." That kind of helps sell books too. You have a story kind of like that. Here you have a shoe, and it's not a story about a big athlete, is it?
No, it was the brand itself, the Converse Chuck All-Star, which everybody knows today, and they sell about 160 million pairs a year worldwide, was absolutely dead. It was 99, it was at every pharmacy, the whole bit, and we had no marketing money. It was all sales driven, but we did have somebody who was doing some product seeding. And really, when the brand really started to turn and started to grow, was when a star that up and coming rock star came on the scene called Avril Lavigne, which you know and I know, but most people probably don't even know, back in 2000 when she really started to take off.
Oh, yeah.
And we sent her a couple pairs of shoes, and she did her first music video, and it was like a 2.5 minute Converse commercial. I mean, the shoes were front and center, were the focal point of the entire video. And after that video launched, the shoes, the Converse Chuck, took off again. It was absolutely crazy how all the advertising world didn't help. But Avril Lavigne launched our brand. And I don't even know if she knows that today.
Well, oh no, if you go online and look up Avril Lavigne in Converse, you'll see she has them signed, and I mean it's a hot item. I think she's well aware that she's associated but that particular brand. I remember my kids starting to wear those things, and I was like, really? I mean,
Yes.
this is so old school. I'm comfortable with that, so I'll go get a pair. Have you worn a pair of those lately, David?
Oh, I have. They're one of the most uncomfortable shoes that you'll ever wear.
I wanted
ever.
you to say it. I wanted
There's
you
no
to say
cushioning. There's no cushioning. There's no support. There's no shock absorption. There's no technology. But back in the day, if you remember, in the 40s and 50s, and 60s, it was the only basketball shoe. Literally, 99 to 100% of everybody who played basketball wore the Converse Chuck, and it's a terrible shoe.
Yeah, and you got to ride it. And the end of that story for you is that team you were part of that bought that company. How long did it take you till you multiplied that thing 10 times, didn't you?
We bought it for 98 million, and within 29 months, it was sold to Nike for 305 million. It got all these merger acquisition awards. It got tons of all these awards. And we actually thought that Nike had overpaid. We thought like, we got over on Nike. And today it's a 1.5 to $2 billion brand. So Nike knew exactly what they were doing. And in our best year ever in the history of Converse, we sold 60 million Chucks, and like a pairs of Chuck All-Stars. Today they sell about 160 million worldwide.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Well,
So it was crazy.
This is Church Hand, so people wonder what we're doing talking about shoes, and your story is so wonderful. I wish we had time for all of it, but I want to you grew up in a Christian home.
Yes.
It wasn't the bad, horrible experience that some people talk about. You accepted Christ at the age of 6, so this was kind of a real thing in your life. But something happened at 16 that rocked your world. Tell me about that.
At 16 years old, I came home from church. It was a Sunday. I'll never forget it. And I was excited to tell my mom about I was going to work with Vacation Bible School, like be one of the leaders, and which my mom she ran for years. So I went in to go tell her, and I found her dead in our house. At 16, she was 49 years old. Yeah. So very traumatic.
Wow. I
Very
mean, my
traumatic.
mom died at 3, but I don't remember it. It's 16.
Right.
You not only remember it, that's like your world is not only rocked. And then the next year, you're in a horrible accident and somebody gets killed.
Yeah. The next year I was driving to school early, and just driving along, and this jogger passed in front of me, and he wasn't in a crosswalk. He was just running across, and boom, before I knew it was dark, before I could see him, boom, hit him, and he died. It wasn't my fault, but still, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter. And he died. And so 17, here we go. 16, 17.
Mm.
Tough years.
And 18 was worse. Tell me about 18. Because
18 was worse.
well, you're already a basketball star in high school, right? So you're pretty cool.
Yeah, I was a big fish in a little pond. Let's say that, John. Yeah.
Okay. How tall are you?
I'm 6'3".
6'3", and you're probably playing center back then, right?
I actually played outside, like
Wow.
a 2 or a 3 position, or
Okay.
wing or forward. Yeah.
But then so they're going to send you off to a Christian school. I say they, your dad at this point, but you had a little conflict, didn't you?
Yeah, we moved to La Mirada. I got a scholarship at Biola University and to play basketball. And my dad got extremely possessive and protective of me and my two brothers. It was just like suffocating. And it got to the point, and I don't want to go through the whole story, but it got to the point where it just could not continue. And he said, if you don't turn around, if you don't do what I tell you to do, then you need to move out. I said, okay. And so without him knowing, I moved out. And and of course he didn't know that I was going to move out, and but it just couldn't go on. And then basically my dad disowned me. We went to the same church. I came up to him. I said, Dad, how you doing? He says, I don't know you. Who are you? I go, I'm your son, David. He goes, no, I don't know you. I don't know who you are. And this went on for quite a long time.
When a real tragedy hits, and I'm careful with the use of the word tragedy, because people sometimes, when grandma at 90 years old dies, that's not a tragedy. That's natural life. It's going to happen. But when you're 16 years old and your mom dies, that's a tragedy. And when something like that hits a family, the reverberations are huge. The chances of alcoholism, drug abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, all that kind of stuff, the family just starts to kind of disintegrate. And in a lot of ways, your dad being possessive and, in a sense, protective, that seems kind of normal. He feels like he has to be mom and dad, and you're rebellious teenager, right?
Exactly. And it was he was not in a really bad way, but he was verbally abusive to all of us, and threatening us and different things. It just couldn't go on. And it was interesting because my brothers hated me for it. And 4 months later, my older brother moved in with me and moved out. So they understood. My dad was, like you said, I think it's normal to understand. And 6 months later, real quick, I went back to his house, and I just wanted him to tell me that he loved me.
I love this part of the story, by the way.
I loved it. Yeah. And I went in the house, and I sat at the kitchen table. I go, Dad, I'm not leaving till you tell me you love me. And he's like, he wouldn't even talk to me. And he's just walking in and out of the house. And I sat there for I don't know how long, at least 6 hours. And finally he came in, he broke down crying. And it gets really emotional even now talking about it. And he broke down crying and said, son, I love you so much, so much. And then from that day on, my dad and I were so close. That bonded us forever. My dad just passed away almost 2 years ago, 91. He lived a full life, an awesome life. And, but that day defined our relationship forever.
How many people, though, when you talk about that 8 hours, how many people are that stubborn and that determined that they're just sitting there? And when your dad finally gave in, it was his heart he was allowed to, he loved you like you wouldn't believe, but he was such a strong, stubborn dude. He wasn't going to tell you. And 8 hours. And you guys had a full life together because of that. That's
Yes.
a long time ago, right?
Long time.
I love that.
Yeah.
And it's some of that determination that is played out in your life. But there was another thing I feel like we have to talk about. You played at Biola. Talk about when you decided you were going to change schools and what that was about.
Yeah, so I redshirted 1 year. I don't know if you understand it. You practice, but you don't play, but you don't use your eligibility. And then the next year I played. I didn't play much. We had a phenomenal team, went to the national tournament. And I just felt like he was bringing in a lot more recruits that next year, and I just didn't feel that his style of play or his coaching matched with me, and so I transferred to Vanguard University. And Bill Reynolds, who became a huge mentor for me, his first year coaching, my first year at Vanguard. So
and you know, as you tell stories like that, so now so you've gone from one Christian school. I mean, Biola is an amazing Christian school.
yes.
And then you're going to another one, which at that point was Southern California College, I think it was the name, right?
Oh, you're the man. I can't believe you pulled that
well,
out.
No, that's I don't know where I brought that out.
Yes, it was.
And became Vanguard. But so you really, I mean, it sounds like you were just a good Christian boy. And so I'm sure everything went fine from there, right?
Well, it did for the first year, and then second year it did not. Second year I went to a Christian school, but many of the basketball players on the team were not Christians. So at that time, I'd never drank. I'd never done anything in that realm. Never done anything. And so over time, a lot of the players encouraged me, let's go to the disco, let's go have a beer. And so that started to happen. And that led me down a road of, girls, beer, alcohol, down a road of, and still, going to church, but led me down a road of really not living for him. And what came out of that was at the end of my junior year, really not living for him, and God really telling me, in my mind, that I'm not going to bless you. If you don't honor me, I'm not going to honor you. And it got to the point where it got so bad that the coach and I were at such a contentious relationship about playing time and things that were going on that he had to
Wait. I want you to tell the dirty side of the story.
Okay.
What did you really do?
So what I did, and we've been going at it all year, about starting, not playing, and it kind of meeting after meeting after meeting. And we were at UCSD, and it came to a boiling point where he put me in again. I made one mistake, and he ripped me out of the game with about 2 minutes to play. And I'd lost it. I lost it. I was fed up. And I turned to him in front of a gym that was half full. And at the top of my voice, pretty much ripped him with every cuss word you can imagine in front of everybody.
Oh, so I can imagine the other school here, they're playing this Christian school, right? and now you're out there swearing like crazy at the coach.
At the coach.
Yeah.
The
so,
coach.
And the result was what?
The result was he said, we went back to the locker room and he said, turn in your jersey now, get dressed. And we had to drive home on the bus, and we'll have a meeting on Monday. And it's really hard to tell you this because I'm very ashamed of what happened from that. But from that came reconciliation as well.
But more than reconciliation, right?
More than reconciliation. So we had that meeting, and I'm like, he says to me, like a father, you're off the team. I want you to play for me your senior year. And I was indignant. No way I'm playing for you. I'm never playing for you again. I'm done. And went out from his office. And then God started to deal with me. And God started to break me down. And I started to realize the life I'd been living, and it wasn't right. And God's not going to honor me. And during the next 3 months, I found Christ again in a very strong way. And then I went back to him 3 months later. I'm like, Coach, I'm sorry for what I did. I'd like you to forgive me, and I want to play for you. I want to play for you. And he's like, great. And not only did he tell me you're going to play for you, but then he said, we want you to be our team captain. What? You just kicked me off the team. This is the great man that he was. And then at the end of the year, I was a very good player, but they also gave me the most inspirational award. Most inspirational, from kicked off the team, the most inspirational. And it was such a God thing. It had nothing to do with me. It's such a God thing in my life. And it just really, really built my faith and strengthened him. So, and that verse, Romans 8:28, that's my theme verse for my life because I've been through so much, is for all things work together for good to them that are called according to his purpose. That's my verse.
You know, David, one of the reasons I wanted to have you here is that you're asked to speak a lot, Rotary clubs and, all the kind of business things where they want to hear the long story, all the shoe stories. And, we started with one, but you've had a lot of success in the business world. But sometimes people don't get to hear that foundation, which for you was stop and start, and life continued for you. You've had a number of dips and ups and downs, but isn't that the nature of real faith, that you have to get through really difficult things in life and remember that God's picture, is not on your license, right?
Right. And for me, I feel a little bit, I'm David, but I feel a little bit like King David. You think about King David, his total lineage of Christ and Jesus came out of that. But he did some bad things. He had an affair and sent the guy's husband to the front lines to be killed, murdered, and adultery. But God still used him because he repented. He knew what he had done wrong and he cried out for repentance. And you know what? That is what is so great about our God, our Lord, is he forgives us. He forgives us and he forgets.
And so now, and for a number of years, a big part of your life has been something called the California Bearcats.
Yeah.
When I first heard about that, when I went to school, the only way you really played is kind of the path that you did. But California Bearcats is a whole different foundation. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, 18 years ago, in the college coach's memory, Bill Reynolds, who we talked about, who brought me back in reconciliation, he died of lymphoma cancer 5 years after he retired. And it was, again, a very tragic thing for me. We were very close. He was a second father to me. And so I felt like right there, I'm starting a basketball club in his memory. I'm doing this. And so in 2002, 2003, in Solana Beach at Santa Fe Christian, we started a youth basketball club with a couple teams. And 18 years later, we have 35 teams. It's the longest running club in San Diego and one of the most respected youth basketball clubs in all of California. And total nonprofit organization. And it was really, I always tell people, they said, why did you start it? And I go, I started to impact one life. One. They go, Dave, that's stupid. You've impacted 1,000 lives. Yeah, maybe. But that's not why it was started. It was impact one life, like Coach Bill Reynolds at Vanguard University, impact my life forever.
And that, I was at a seminar a few years ago, and the man was talking about why so many strategies don't work. And why so many purpose statements are ineffective, and it just comes down to, so what are you going to do? And for you, what am I going to do? Okay, I'm willing to touch one. Forget about I'm going to reach Orange County for whatever. I'm going to reach the world. I'm going to reach. But if you can do one, and I think if all of our listeners worried about not doing the big successful things, not buying Converse in their lifetime, if you can touch somebody,
Yes.
just one person today who's hurting that needs a phone call, it matters. But for you, just give me a little bit more on the club system, because a lot of people don't get really. So what's a club system? What are the age of the kids? Who's part of it? That kind of thing.
It goes from first grade through high school. So we have our Little Cats program. We start them off, the development program, and then all the way through high school. We have kids now going to Division I, Division II, Division III, NAIA, getting scholarships, which is always a dream. And so all our entire handbook is built around John Wooden's principles, and it's built around it's built around Bill Reynolds principles. This guy, I love this guy right
Yeah.
here.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I have all his books. And so it was built around that. And it was built around Bill Reynolds, my coach in college, all the principles, faith-based organization. And we just put it all in the handbook and said, okay, God, use it. We anointed the gym with oil every tryout and said, Lord, bring them in. We've never advertised. It's totally word of mouth. And so, we just had a tryout and I prayed at the end. And I had a parent come up to me crying. She goes, I can't believe you had the guts to pray at a tryout. A tryout with 20 people I don't even know. And I go, we've been praying since day one at every tryout, every practice, every prayer meeting. And we will continue to. So it's all based on biblical John Wooden principles.
And lives, so many lives have been touched, but you decided now that you're not as old as me, but you're getting there, and you decided that you really wanted to have another impact that just really it just doesn't make any sense. You live in a nice house in the most beautiful place in the world in Southern California, and you decided that you're going to pick up and go somewhere, and this Bearcats are going to go with you. What's that about?
2 years ago, I had a dream. I've never had a vision before, a dream. Maybe you've had a lot of them, but I'd never had a dream where God came to me, and it was plain as day to me that it was God coming to me. And he goes, hey, I want you to do the same thing you did with the California Bearcats overseas. And I'm like, and I'm in the corporate world and all this stuff. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. But okay, Lord. And it's like, if God tells you to go and you're honoring him, you got to go. You got to go. If God says go is. And so I heard a preacher say, if you want to find out whether it's right or you should be doing it, start asking a lot of people, hey, I had this dream. What do you think? Hey, I had this dream. What do you think? Validate. And everybody's like, go, follow it. God's talking to you. And so I didn't really understand where, but I knew that I loved Asia because I spent a lot of time there. And I've been to the Philippines like 25 times, and I love the Filipino people and embraced them. And so I really felt that God was saying, I want you to go to the Philippines. And that was before the pandemic. And I was going to wait about 2 more years until I retired. I have all these plans, but God's plans are different, right? And so when the pandemic hit, God said, you're not getting another corporate job. You're going. And so we have been, since March, have been following that plan and developing and, doing YouTube things to build awareness, YouTube videos. And so we're just believing that Christ is leading us there. 49% unemployment in the Philippines, 90% down, 90% in tourism. There's people that are going to need love, joy, happiness, confidence, and a hope and a vision for the future. And so we're just being servants of God, and we're going to go do that.
There's going to be people who going to want to be part of that. And we don't have all the details that you gave me in terms of how to do that. But the bottom line, if they go onto a website and just hit the contact button, you'll get back to them in terms of how to give and that. What's the best website?
The best website is CaliforniaBearcats.com. And again, as you said, John, go to the contact button, and then you'll see you'll also see a payment button, and you just click that. You can give, and just in the box put Philippine Bearcats in the memo section, or you can contact me at CaliforniaPhilippinesBearcats@gmail.com, and I can send out the sheet that I sent to you. So.
Well, we so appreciate it, and just prayers with you. You've been so vulnerable, David. I appreciate that. It's an exciting thing that you're doing, and you've had an interesting past. I really am looking forward to talking to you when you get to the Philippines. We can still get you here, and get to hear how it's going. I just want to mention, because I really respect it, the degree that everything you raise, none of it goes for your own support. It's so cool you're able to do that. Here at Church Hand, I'm largely supported by nonprofit contributions to the work I do at Standing Stone, and I need that. But it got to feel good on your part to say, you know what, you're taking care of yourself in a way. You're asking for money for these kids to be touched, and there's going to be people who want to be part of that. And thank you. Let
Yeah,
me just say a word.
100% of everything given gives totally to the efforts there with the club and to the Philippines. God's blessed me with retirement income and investments, so I don't need it. And that makes it, for me, kind of makes it cool. And everybody's different, but for me, that makes it cool.
That's wonderful. Let me just say this before we close, David. An outsider may look at David Coursey and see the successful entrepreneur, marketing leader, former college basketball star, and leader to countless kids. None of that would be wrong. It just wouldn't be the whole story. And at Church Hurts and we remember the and part of life. And for David, the and is a big part of the story. Some of it includes sad tales from his teenage years, which are more formative than he could have imagined at the time. A mom who was gone far too soon, an accident that just wasn't fair, a coach who was willing to be more than a coach and to care more about the boy than the basketball. I love hearing his stories about running around in the upper echelons of the athletic shoe world. And I also like hearing his honesty about his ego, his failings, his disappointments, and his fears. But then we get back to the feet his shoes cover. David is choosing to be that messenger talked about in the Bible, whose feet are taking a message to the other side of the world. The extreme contrast, Southern California, Philippines. It's hard to overstate. He isn't asking support, not for himself or his expenses, but he is asking for support for kids who they're going to reach. As you think of David in his next step of life, remember, David's God. David is one who has a lot going, and he's going to those who don't have a lot. Why? Because David has a God that is like that. From heaven to earth with a message that said, I want to be closer with you. I want to be in a relationship with you. You can stop fighting me. I love you. God said, I love you. He did. Really? Yep. And it's worth a thought. For Church Hurts and this is John Bash. Enjoy God today, won't you?